For 50 years, the Volaran Dominion watched humanity retreat. We dismantled our fleets, abandoned colonies, and absorbed every insult in eerie silence. They mistook that silence for surrender. When 3 war moons moved over Luna and demanded Earth kneel, they expected trembling obedience. Instead, a single word crackled through the comm network. Enough. And beneath the ice of Europa, a weapon we'd been cultivating for generations woke up. 7 minutes later, the Volaran throne world was an asteroid field. This is not a legend. It's not a hypothetical wargame simulation. It is the official, classified account of first contact between humanity and the Volaran Dominion, and the terrifying secret that almost cost us our existence, until it saved it. But how did a species that had renounced war manage to unmake a world in under 7 minutes? It began in 2158 when the first Volaran scouts emerged from a rift near Jupiter. They were bipedal, armored in obsidian scales, and their war doctrine was simple: total annihilation of any species that refused to kneel. Over the following decades, the Dominion swallowed 37 civilizations. They harvested planetary cores, enslaved populations, and extinguished stars. And then they found us. Humanity at the time was a multi-system alliance, a coalition of colonies stretching from Alpha Centauri to Kepler-62. We had warships, orbital defense grids, and a standing military of billions. But something had changed in our collective psyche. After 2 centuries of brutal interstellar expansion and internal conflict, we had grown weary of conquest. We had signed treaties, demilitarized entire sectors, and poured our resources into medical research and deep space exploration. When the Volaran diplomats first addressed the UN General Assembly, they spoke not of peace but of tribute. They demanded we dismantle our outer fleet, cede 12 colonial systems, and submit to a protectorate status. The ambassador, a man named Elias Vance, listened with closed eyes. And then he said one word: agreed. The Dominion was stunned. They expected defiance, not capitulation. And so began what they called the Great Silence. Year after year, humanity absorbed every insult. The Volarans annexed our mining stations. We evacuated without a shot. They destroyed a refugee convoy near Tau Ceti. We offered a formal apology for the navigational error. General Arkin Voss, the Volaran Warmaster, openly mocked us in the galactic councils, calling humanity a spent species, a herd waiting for the slaughterhouse. But the silence was not surrender. It was a mask. Deep beneath the frozen crust of Europa, an immense network of tunnels had been excavated in absolute secrecy. The project had no official name, no funding trace, and no oversight. It was codenamed Prometheus, and it was led by Dr. Ilna Vega, a theoretical physics prodigy who had once pioneered earthquake prediction on Mars. Vega had discovered something horrifying: that planetary crusts possess a natural harmonic frequency, a song of the stone. And if you could amplify that frequency with synchronized resonance drones, you could literally shake a world apart. Not with bombs or energy beams, but with sound and pressure. It was a weapon that bypassed shields, ignored armor, and left no time to surrender. For 50 years, Prometheus grew in the dark. Thousands of engineers lived their entire lives underground, never seeing the sky. Their families told they were workers on a geothermal plant. Meanwhile, Ambassador Vance continued to smile and bow, enduring the mockery, waiting for the test. The Volarans, emboldened by our weakness, committed their final act of arrogance. They moved 3 war moons into lunar orbit, each carrying planet cracker cannons, and issued an ultimatum: kneel by dawn or Earth will burn. As the Volaran fleet commander's hologram flickered in the UN chamber, Elias Vance rose from his chair with a calm that chilled the air. He walked to the comms console, fingers hovering over the transmission key. On Europa, Dr. Vega's array was fully charged for the first time. The target was Luna. The target was the Volaran homeworld itself, a continent-sized seismic bell waiting to be rung. Vance pressed the button. The signal reached the Prometheus array in less than a picosecond, traveling through dark fiber laid across the Jovian moons. Deep beneath Europa's ice, inside a cavern carved from the mantle itself, Dr. Ilna Vega watched the final sequence initiate. The resonance drones, a lattice of 10,000 harmonic emitters buried across the throne world's tectonic plates over decades by automated stealth probes, began to sing. At first, it was imperceptible, a low hum beneath the Volaran populace's feet. Generals in their obsidian towers felt a strange vibration in their chests, blamed it on stress. On the surface of the Volaran homeworld, a planet called Volara, billions went about their day. They celebrated the imminent conquest of humanity. They laughed at our weakness, believing the war moons over Luna would deliver instant victory. They had no idea that the ground beneath them was about to become their executioner. Vega stood in her command pod, surrounded by engineers who had spent their entire adult lives underground. She was 67 years old, her body frail from a lifetime of zero sunlight, but her mind razor-sharp. She had been recruited at 23 by Ambassador Vance himself, plucked from a Martian university and told that her harmonic research could save the human species. She had believed him. And now, as the array reached critical synchronization, she finally allowed herself a single tear. She whispered the activation phrase, "For the silent." Across the cavern, the phase-locked amplifiers pushed the resonance to full power. On Volara, the hum became a rumble. In the capital city of Karnak, the obsidian spires began to sway. Citizens staggered into the streets, confused. No weapon had ever reached them through the planetary shields, which repelled plasma and kinetic impacts with contemptuous ease. But Prometheus did not fire a weapon. It merely spoke the planet's own language back to it, louder and louder, until the crust itself became the weapon. The first fissure opened directly beneath the High Command Citadel, a jagged wound that swallowed the building whole in a roar of collapsing stone. War Master Arkin Voss, the architect of humanity's humiliation, was inside a command bunker a mile below when the walls cracked. He had only seconds to realize that the species he had mocked for decades had just executed the most devastating preemptive strike in galactic history. The resonance cascade accelerated exponentially. The planet's crust fractured into massive continental plates that began to grind and tilt. Oceans sloshed from their basins, flash boiling into superheated steam that ripped into the upper atmosphere. The sky turned red as volcanic eruptions blanketed the planet, but the eruptions were not natural. They were the final notes of a planetary death song. Within 3 minutes, the entire mantle began to delaminate. Vega watched the telemetry in silence, her team utterly still. The planet's core rumbled in sympathy, its rotation disrupted. The Volaran fleet in high orbit detected the catastrophe, but their ships could not fire on a planet, nor could they save it. They could only broadcast desperate pleas for evacuation that would never come. The final chord of the resonance array aligned with the planet's primary harmonic, a frequency that shattered the crust like a wineglass struck by an opera singer. Volara's continents ran apart, plunging into the molten abyss. In 7 minutes and 3 seconds, a world of 14 billion souls became an expanding ring of rubble and glowing gas. Elias Vance stood in the UN General Assembly Hall, the holographic feed switching from the Volaran commander's arrogant ultimatum to the catastrophic sensor data from the Volara system. The assembled diplomats and military leaders watched in stunned silence. Some wept, others clutched their heads. Vance did not smile. He turned to face the War Moon commanders still broadcasting from Luna, their faces now ashen, and spoke in flawless Volaran. "We told you. Enough." The Volaran fleet over Luna went silent for exactly 42 seconds. That silence was the most dangerous sound in the universe, because while Vance and the Prometheus team had achieved the impossible, they had also painted a target on Earth more terrifying than anything before. If the Volaran armada decided that honor demanded vengeance, they could incinerate Earth in minutes. The War Moon's planet crackers were already hot. The admiral in command above Luna was a Volaran named Kale Tor, known for his fanatical devotion to the Dominion's supremacy. He had lost his homeworld, his family, his entire species' future, and his guns were already aimed at Earth. The question was not whether he could destroy humanity, it was whether he would choose to die for that vengeance. Humanity had played its final card, and now the bluff had to hold. The 42 seconds of silence inside the United Nations General Assembly felt longer than the 50 years of the Great Silence leading up to them. Every human representative stared at the holographic feeds from Luna, where 3 Volaran war moons hovered like executioners' axes. On the flag bridge of the Volaran flagship Spear of Dominion, Admiral Kale Tor stood frozen before a wall of tactical displays showing the death of his homeworld. The sensor data was irrefutable. Volara's mass signature was gone, replaced by an expanding debris field. 14 billion Volarans, the entire cultural and genetic archive of his species, reduced to a cloud of cooling rock. Tor's claws dug into the command console, scoring the metal. His tactical officer, a young Volaran named Gera Vek, reported that the War Moon cannons were fully charged and targeting the human homeworld. All they needed was the order. Tor opened his communications channel to Earth. His voice was a low, guttural rasp that echoed through the UN chamber. "You have murdered a world. You will now watch yours die." But Ambassador Elias Vance did not flinch. He stood at the central dais, still wearing the same weathered diplomatic uniform he had worn for 3 decades of humiliation. He signaled the Prometheus array on Europa to maintain full power, but not to fire. Then he spoke directly into the open channel, his voice calm and deliberate. "Admiral Tor, in 19 seconds, the same resonance cascade that destroyed Volara will be initiated on every Volaran colony world within a 50 light-year radius. That includes the nursery worlds at Vekanis, the military forge at Gorath, and the civilian resettlement hub at Talais Prime. Your remaining population, approximately 62 billion, will die. You will be the last Volaran, and you will live to remember that you could have saved them." The General Assembly gasped. This was the final piece of the Prometheus strategy. The drones were never limited to the homeworld. Dr. Vega had overseen the deployment of harmonic emitters on 17 Volaran-held planets, a program that began before the Volarans even issued their first ultimatum. Humanity had not just been silent for 50 years. It had been weaving a noose around the entire Dominion while smiling at every insult. The silence was not a retreat. It was the time needed to dig the graves. On the Spear of Dominion, Gera Vek's tactical board lit up with emergency channels from the other colonies. The planetary governors were screaming for orders. They had detected subspace anomalies, humming vibrations deep within their crusts. The Volaran's advanced sensors, now trained inward, confirmed the presence of thousands of tiny emitters buried in mantle fissures. They could not be disarmed. They could not be shielded. And their activation was linked to a dead man's switch. If the Earth array went silent, all 17 worlds would simultaneously ignite. Admiral Tor's certainty shattered. He had been prepared to die for vengeance, to martyr his species in fire. But extinction of the entire Volaran race, that was a burden no War Master could bear. He looked at the tactical displays, at the war moons whose planet crackers could incinerate Earth in minutes, and he saw a trap from which there was no escape. If he fired, every remaining Volaran died. If he surrendered, he would be known as the Admiral who bowed to a species he had called prey. But there was another force at play. On the War Moon Dominion's reach, a faction of Volaran zealots led by Subcommander Verk refused to accept the logic. Verk was a fanatic who had lost his entire lineage in the Volara catastrophe. He believed that survival without honor was worse than death. Through a closed command loop, he rallied 3 heavy cruisers and a wing of atmospheric bombers. Ignoring Tor's orders, Verk launched a rogue attack run on Earth. The General Assembly's holograms shifted to show the incoming strike, plasma torpedoes and kinetic rods racing toward the planet. But humanity had not left Earth undefended. The Prometheus array had a secondary function that not even most of its engineers knew. As the incoming ordnance crossed the exosphere, a harmonic pulse, a standing wave of gravitational resonance, radiated outward from Europa. It did not destroy the weapons. It simply shifted their trajectories by a fraction of a degree. The plasma torpedoes bent away from the atmosphere, spiraling into deep space. The kinetic rods shattered against the moon's surface, harmlessly. The attack failed in less than 3 seconds. Verk's ships were then targeted by the resonance drones on Gorath, the military forge planet, and were instantly vibrated into structural failure. The rogue cruisers disintegrated, leaving only debris. This was the moment that redefined the galactic order. The Volaran fleet recognized that humanity possessed not just a planet-killing weapon, but a perfect defense, a shield that could bend space-time itself using harmonic frequencies. The Great Silence had been the gestation of a species that had moved beyond war into a terrifying new paradigm. Admiral Tor, facing the annihilation of his species and the failure of his rogue element, transmitted his unconditional surrender. The war moons powered down their planet crackers and moved into a parking orbit. The Dominion, once the terror of the galaxy, had been neutralized in under 8 minutes, but the true cost of Prometheus was only beginning to surface. As the Volarian fleet surrendered, Dr. Vega transmitted a warning to the UN. The resonance technology did not simply break planets, it awakened something in the quantum fabric of the galaxy. The destruction of Volara had sent a shockwave through subspace that was already echoing back from places humanity had never mapped. Something ancient, something that had been sleeping in the dark between stars, had heard the death song, and it was beginning to stir. The formal surrender of the Volaran Dominion was signed aboard the Spear of Dominion exactly 12 hours after the resonance cascade subsided. Admiral Kale Tor knelt before a human delegation led by Elias Vance, an act that would have been unthinkable just a day prior. The war moons powered down permanently, their planet cracker cannons disassembled under human supervision. The 16 remaining colony worlds agreed to unconditional disarmament and an indefinite occupation by a newly formed human peacekeeping force. The Volaran species, once the galaxy's most fearsome predator, had been reduced to a protectorate of the very herd they had mocked. But Vance's face showed no triumph. When asked by a journalist why he looked so grim on humanity's greatest day, he replied, "Because we broke the silence, and now everyone is listening." On Europa, Dr. Ilna Vega faced a crisis that no one outside Prometheus had anticipated. The resonance cascade had not simply shattered a planet. It had sent a directed gravitational pulse into subspace, a shockwave that propagated faster than light through the quantum foam underlying reality. And something had reflected that pulse back. Vega's instruments detected a coherent return signal, structured, deliberate, and impossibly ancient, originating from a void region between galaxies, a place where no stars existed and where even the Volarans had never ventured. The signal carried encoded information that her team rushed to decrypt. When the first fragments were translated, Vega locked the entire facility down. She summoned Vance through a secured channel and spoke words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "We didn't just kill a world, Elias. We rang a doorbell." The decryption took 3 weeks. The message was not in any known language, but its mathematical structure was universal, a sequence of prime numbers nested within a fractal embedding that mapped gravitational constants. It was an introduction, a handshake protocol from an intelligence that had waited in the dark for eons, using resonance as a listening mechanism. Prometheus, designed to destroy, had inadvertently broadcast humanity's existence with a deafening shout, and whatever was out there now knew precisely where we were. The United Nations convened a closed session known as the Prometheus Accords. Vega presented the full analysis. The return signal was still receiving amplification from the original pulse, meaning it was not just an echo but an ongoing transmission. The signal's strength increased by 0.3% every hour, indicating that the source was approaching. Velocity calculations suggested an entity, or a fleet, or a structure, moving at nearly the speed of light, having been dormant until the death song activated it. Its estimated arrival time, just under 2 years. Humanity had won its trial by fire against the Volarans, but in doing so, it had drawn the attention of something far beyond the Dominion's comprehension. The silence that had protected us for millennia was gone, replaced by a cosmic beacon that screamed into the void, "Here we are. Come find us." Ambassador Vance, now appointed as humanity's first Secretary of Galactic Security, addressed the closed session with a revelation that reshaped the entire narrative. He disclosed that the Prometheus array had been conceived not solely as a weapon, but as a contingency for this exact scenario. The original designers, back in 2160, had theorized that any sufficiently advanced resonance technology would be detectable by a higher-order intelligence. They called it the resonance hypothesis, the idea that the fabric of spacetime itself was a communication medium for entities that had transcended physical form. The destruction of the Volaran homeworld was never just about defense. It was a deliberate test. Would the universe answer? And now it had. The final piece of the Prometheus plan, declassified for the first time in this account, revealed that the array on Europa was only the prototype. The true scale of the human defense network was not limited to the Volaran colonies. For 50 years, automated fabrication units had been seeding resonance emitters on every rocky body within a 100 light-year radius, including Earth's own moon, Mars, and even the core of the Sun. Humanity was not a herd waiting to be slaughtered. It was a species that had prepared for war on a scale none of its adversaries could imagine. And the stirring ancient intelligence now racing toward us would find not a frightened backwater, but a civilization that had chosen silence as a strategy, and was ready to speak with a voice that could unmake the very stars. Humanity had spent 50 years in silence, not because we had forgotten how to fight, but because we had learned something far more terrifying, that the universe does not reward the loudest voice, it answers the most patient one. We had let the galaxy believe we were weak. We absorbed humiliation, surrendered territory, allowed our fleets to rust and our enemies to gloat. And when the moment came, we did not simply defeat an empire. We erased it from existence in less time than it takes to brew a cup of coffee. The Volaran Dominion never understood that a predator does not roar before it strikes. It waits. But the true weight of this story is not the weapon itself. It is what the weapon called forth. Somewhere in the black between galaxies, an intelligence older than our sun has heard our voice. It has been listening for eons, waiting for another species to discover the song of the stones. And now it is coming. What will it find when it arrives? A frightened herd? No, it will find a species that chose silence not out of surrender but out of discipline. A species that turned its capacity for destruction into a promise. We will never strike first, but we will always strike last. If this story has stayed with you, if the idea of hidden weapons beneath the ice, of 50-year bluffs, and of ancient entities stirring in the void has captured your imagination, then you are exactly where you need to be. Hit that like button and share this documentary with someone who needs to hear humanity's true origin story. Subscribe and ring the bell because the silence is over, and the next signal from the dark could arrive at any moment. This channel will be here to decode it when it does. Until then, keep listening. The universe is full of whispers.